The following program is an original MCM production for Community Channel 14.
Hello and welcome to Taste the Season. I'm Lisa Kingery, registered dietitian and culinary educator for the Fondy Farmers Market, and I'm here today to show you how to make dilly beans, to can dilly beans. And I know a lot of you are really interested in canning. You've been coming to the farmers market and asking me all sorts of questions, and I just recently became a master food preserver. So I can answer the questions, but I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a videotape so that you can see how to actually can and make pickles. And instead of making cucumber pickles, I thought I'd make dilly beans because many people had talked to me about green beans, and dilly beans are actually one of my favorite pickles, and so we're going to do that. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is your recipe. I saw many people bringing me recipes that were grandma's recipe, and you cannot use grandma's recipe anymore. You need to make sure you follow a recipe that has been tested and approved by either Extension, the University of Wisconsin Extension, or really any extension, Georgia Extension, Colorado Extension, any state school with or university extension will be fine, or Ball, which makes the jars. They also have all tested recipes so that we're sure that the food that we can is safe, because you don't want to be that person that made 9 people in their church sick from canned things that were canned all wrong, right? You don't want to be that person. So we're going to follow one of these cookbooks. You know, this is another one from Ball. Joy of Pickling is another really good cookbook that has approved recipes. So number 1, approved recipe. Number 2, we're going to have the right equipment. And so when you can, you need to have canning jars. You can't just use an old mayonnaise jar that you had. It has to be a canning jar. You can buy these at any houseware supply store. They were at my grocery store, and I live right here in the city. So if they're at my grocery store and you live out in the countryside, they're definitely at your grocery store. So they're Ball and Kerr are the 2 companies that make these kind of canning jars, and then they have a special lid, and it's got 2 screws. This one can be used over and over and over again. This 2 can be used over and over and over again. This can be used one time and one time only for canning. I mean, you could put, I don't know, some sauce that you made in there and put it in the refrigerator, but you can't can again with it. So you need that. You need a 2-piece lid and canning jar. You also are going to need a hot water bath canner, which is just really a big pot that you can fill with water. Or I invested this year in this lovely piece of equipment. This is a steam canner, and instead of having a huge pot that I had to fill with water and bring to a boil, I now just have this bottom here that I fill with water, and there's a rack inside, and then I can bring that to a boil and it'll steam can everything. And so for pickles and jams, it's perfectly fine to do this. Steam canning. Just make sure you follow the instructions on your recipe, and if it says to hot water bath can it for 10 minutes, then just do the steaming for 10 minutes. So that's my steam canner, and I love it because I'm not waiting for 20 or 30 minutes for water to come to a boil. So that's important. Then you're also going to need one of these things right here, and this is so you can lift up jars when they're piping hot. Ooh, we can't move it here, see? It's a really wonderful tool. I love this tool. So you need one of these. They were very cheap, and again, I bought it with canning supply. I found one at the grocery store. I found one at Ace Hardware. I found one at Farm and Fleet. So they're everywhere. Then you need a metal skewer to make sure that all the ingredients that you got into the can have got the bubbles out. I just use an old chopstick. You could buy a special skewer if you want. And that is pretty much it on the equipment. Okay, now the other thing you're going to need is ingredients. So when you're using pickles, you need to have a vinegar. Pickles always have vinegar in them, water, and salt, and or sugar. So the vinegar that you choose generally is going to be, this is one of the best ones to use. It's a cider vinegar. It's not just a white vinegar, but you could use white vinegar. The most important thing to note is 5% acidity, not 4% acidity. That's not acidic enough. It needs to be at least 5% acidity. And that's what the majority of vinegar is, but check the label because I have seen some that had 4%. So this is important. The other thing that you'll need is canning salt in here. It says canning and pickling salt. And canning and pickling salt is really just salt that doesn't have any anti-caking agents in it. And so it's just pure salt. And if you don't use that, it could get cloudy in your pickles. So that is that. And we're making dilly beans. So dilly beans are green beans that you have pickled. And here I have a little bit more than 2 pounds, but you need 2 pounds of green beans that have been cleaned, which I have done, and then cut to fit in your pickle jar. And here, see, they have. So I've done that, and I decided to use a nice combination of wax beans and green beans because it looks pretty. So we have that, and I'm going to need a clove of garlic for each one. It's going to fill up 4-pint jars, so I have 1 clove of garlic for each one. I'm going to need dill, which I have right here, and dill is fresh and wonderful and seasoned here at the farmer's market, so you can stick that in there, and it's got a lovely, lovely dill fragrance. That's why we love dill pickles. And then the last thing we'll need is crushed red pepper, which I have here. Some people like to put in a fresh hot chili pepper. I don't, so it's a little too hot for me, and my kids won't eat it then, so I always like to use this, so I just use a little bit. And so that's it for the ingredients. Now, to prepare your jars, what you need to do is you need to wash them extra good, plus the lids and the screw top. You need to wash them in hot soapy water, which I have done. And then you need to put them in a hot water bath and keep them simmering, not boiling. They don't need to be sterilized at 180 degrees, and that includes this part and this part. This part, just set it aside. You don't need to do that because it'll rust and it's not going to be touching the food directly anyway. So you can do it that way, but an easier way to do it, so you have to keep these jars at 180 degrees. So while you're cooking and prepping things, it's kind of hard to do that. So it could be on your stove top. It could be, if you have a slow cooker, you could put it in your slow cooker, your crock pot, and make sure it's all immersed in water and that it's at 180 degrees. But actually my favorite and easiest method of doing it is to put it in the dishwasher, and that's what I've done. So I put 4-pint jars in the dishwasher. I ran the dishwasher and I kept them in there. So they're just piping hot, steaming away in the dishwasher, which just finished. And I'm going to pull them out one by one, and I'm going to pack my dilly beans in there. So I'll get those out in a minute. So I've prepped these. I've got my cans are all ready. They're sitting in the dishwasher. And now the last thing I need to do is to get my brine, my vinegar. So these are a fresh packed pickle. So we need to add acidity to them. And the acidity in the salt is what's going to preserve them in perpetuity on my shelf. So the first thing I have is I have a saucepan, and I put in 2.5 cups of water. Here we go. Saucepan, 2.5. And I'm going to start bringing it to a boil. I'm also going to add to this, it's a very simple recipe. I'm adding 2 3/4 cup of the vinegar. So I've just got 2.5 cups water, 2 3/4 cup vinegar. And I'm going to bring that to a boil along with the pickling salt. And I'm going to bring 3 tablespoons of pickling salt to a boil with it. So it'll all dissolve in there. There we go. Just a little bit more there. It's important when you can to be very precise. I think if you know me and you've watched my show long enough, you know that I'm very imprecise when cooking. This is not the time to be imprecise. You must follow the directions very specifically. So while I'm bringing that to a boil, I'm going to go get in one of my canning jars one at a time, and I'm going to start packing them with my green beans. So here I am in the dishwasher, piping hot, nice and warm. hot, hot, hot. And I'm going to put in there one of these little fronds, and then I'm going to put in along with my garlic, throwing that at the bottom. And I could be a little bit more. I'm going to just start shoving them in. I'll be a little more artful at the end. Watch, you'll see. Okay. And quite frankly, this is the most tedious part of the whole thing, because green beans are kind of floppy. But since we're packing them in there raw, they're going to shrink down when we add that hot brine to it, and they're also going to continue to shrink down when we process it in the steam canner. And because of that, we want to make sure that we pack it as tight as we can, even though it becomes kind of difficult. Because the tighter we pack it, even if we pack it as tightly as we can, it's still going to shrink, and the less, it's going to start floating around if it's got too little in there. All right. That looks pretty. All right. Okay. That one's not working. Okay. And okay. All right. And then I'm going to take my crushed red pepper, and I've got them packed nice and tight in there, and I'm going to add now to be so precise on this one, a 1/4 teaspoon. If you don't like pepper, hot pepper, you don't have to add that at all. It's really the dill and the garlic that we're looking for. All right. And then over here, I'm going to take this, make sure it's all brought to a boil. Okay, so the vinegar has been brought to a boil, and I already filled up these 3 jars, but remember we were doing 4, so I'm going to fill up this last jar so you can see. So I packed every single one of those with the wax and the green beans, and then I add the piping hot vinegar, water, salt combination to the jar, and I leave a 1/4 inch headspace. There's all this vernacular that goes with canning, and headspace is one of them. Headspace is simply the measurement from the very top rim to where the liquid comes to. So you want 1/4 inch, and if you want to be very precise, all you can do is keep a little measuring stick in your kitchen drawer. But you could just guesstimate 2. You don't want to be too much, or it won't be able to make a proper seal, and you don't want to be too little, because again, it won't make a proper seal. So this is a 1/4 inch. Then I take my hot lid and I make sure that this is all clean around the rim, because I want to make sure, again, there's a good seal. And then I put that there, and I take my screw and I tighten it to fingertip tight, not just just as soon as I feel a little bit of resistance from my fingertips, very lightly, I stop, because you don't want it to be super tight, because when it heats in the steam canner, the liquid is going to start bubbling and steam needs to escape. And how is it going to escape if you've screwed this super tight? You also don't want it to be super loose either, but just till fingertip tight. So I've got all 4, it's piping hot here. And then I've got my steam canner going, and you see there's holes on both sides of the steam canner, and the steam is coming out really quickly, right? Within a steady flow. That means it's vented, and I wanted to make sure that it's completely, fully vented steam for at least a minute or two so that the whole interior is covered with steam. Okay, so now that I know that it is, I'm going to remove this and pulling this back this way so that the steam doesn't come up and burn my face. And then I'm going to take my special tool here and I'm going to put this on the rack. Okay. And there we are. There we are. And I'm going to close this again. And again, what I'm going to wait for is I'm going to wait for the steam to start coming out of these holes in a steady flow, and then it's perfectly fully vented is what what you call it. And once that is occurring, then I can begin timing it. And the time is for a 10-minute process. So as soon as that starts coming out fully, I'm going to hit 10 minutes on my timer, and you really want to be precise about this, so make sure you invest in a timer. 10 minutes on my timer, and then once I hear the beep, 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 I'm not going to hurry up and run over here and grab this and pull it off. No, I'm going to wait another 5 minutes with the heat off, and after 5 minutes have passed, then I'm going to meet you back here and we're going to pull it off and see what happened under there, okay? So first 10 minutes of steam, and then wait 5 minutes with no heat and just wait for it to rest a bit. Okay, so the 10 minutes have come and gone, and then I turned it off and 5 minutes passed and it's just been resting here, and so I am going to take them out and see what happened. Make sure you pull that away from you. And this steam bath canner was really not expensive at all. And in the past I used a hot water bath canner, and it was, you know, I just used a big pot I had. But this was my little investment for this year, and I've been so happy that I did get it. So I pull this out, and I just heard one. I don't know if you heard that too. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let this sit here, and I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to jiggle it. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm going to keep it out of a draft, and it's just going to sit here on this tea towel for about 24 hours. And I'm going to come back and check it later. And what I'm going to check for when I come back is that the seal has formed, and I can already tell that it has, but I'm just not going to touch it. So what I want to show you over here is some dilly beans that I had made earlier, and then you can see what I mean. So you can't hear anything. There's this is a pickle that I made and I opened, and you can hear that go down, and it does that. See? That's not sealed. This, it's sealed. And so there's a vacuum seal there, and so I could put this up on a shelf and it'll keep for, you know, a year, 2 years. And I had another jar of dilly beans that I had opened up and I was eating earlier. And what I want you to note is that this screw band right here has been removed. So these are sealed, and I'm going to put them on the shelf like this without the screw band. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if something did happen to these beans and they weren't sealed for some reason, or they were going to spill open or whatever, I would be able to see that easier, and it wouldn't, this band wouldn't like hide that. Also, if they started spilling over, this could rust this and really cause a huge mess. So it's best to store them up on your shelf just like this. Also, you want to make sure that you label it. I have dilly beans. I made these back in August. And so that is how you make pickles, dilly beans in particular, but you can really do any vegetable. You just need to find a really good recipe, and again, look at the Ball Blue Book, or check out Extension on the website, or go to the library, and there's all sorts of wonderful cookbooks that show you how to can, and you can do your own pickling recipe from them. All right, so thank you for coming to Taste the Season, where we have at the Fondy Farmers Market the freshest, best tasting, locally grown seasonal vegetables in all of southeast Wisconsin. And we'd like you to come join us there at the Fondy Market from Saturday before Mother's Day until the Saturday before Thanksgiving. Thanks for stopping by.
This has been an MCM Productions program.